Thank you for everyone for joining us. My name is Tom Millington with Abroadia. I would like to introduce my colleague, Jessica Terrell. She is our Student Engagement Officer, so she's helping us get students to Abroadia because I'm too old. I can't really relate to students anymore. So she brings a lot of energy. She's much more technically savvy than I am. So I think that helps. So thank you, Jess, for joining us. And our guest here is David Kamp. He really needs no introduction. I think you know him as a very prominent thought leader in international education. He has a blog, and I have the link, but we'll show you. But he's here just to share his perspective on international education. What his role has been in it, and what he sees for the field moving forward. So before I turn this over to David, there's just a couple things I think everyone already knows that once you've come on here, you're on mute. Please remain on mute until you have a question to ask towards the end of the session. I always like to joke about this, but it has happened. We've had dogs barking in the background, or children crying, or people talking at the same time, which is really giving us some distortion. So please do that. And if you have any questions, certainly send them up in chat, and Jess will be monitoring that. David does have some slides, and he'll share them with you as well at the end, because we're not going to read them all through this. So. David, without further ado, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I guess I'll get the ball rolling. Just my only question here is, so how did you become involved in international education?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it goes back to when I was 15, and I was supposed to go on a ski trip with my mom, who was online, by the way, so hello, Mom, from Milwaukee, and I got the mumps, and I couldn't go, and so the parents are divorced, so I was at my dad's house, suburb of Milwaukee, as was my mom, and my mom was talking to someone on our block, and both of her daughters one had gone on this exchange through high school to high school. It wasn't through an organization, and they had room to go to Rosenheim, Germany for another student. And my mom called me and said, hey, would you like to go to Germany? And kind of explained it and said, think about it overnight or what. I think I thought about it for 5 minutes and called her back and said, count me in. And so I went, and it was just such an incredible experience. And I remember the experience I had in looking at the chaperones thinking, that's what I want to do for a job. I'm not so sure I'd be as comfortable taking 15-year-olds or a 15-year-old David Kamp abroad. I wasn't disruptive or anything like that, but it's 15, had a great time, and so it just kind of evolved from there. And then I went again after high school to the same program. We hosted actually a student my junior year, so I turned 16 and 18 on exchange, and then studied abroad in Valladolid, Spain, spring of junior year, and it really kind of solidified that I wanted to work in this field. And I tried to get an internship at my institution, volunteer, just to work, preferably paid, but they didn't have any openings. And I wound up working after graduating, working in human services for 7 years. 2 years almost were working in Fort Dodge, Iowa with juvenile delinquents. That was a tough job, to be honest. And then moved to Lincoln, Nebraska. I met my wife on the same study abroad program. She had studied abroad. She exchanged in Honduras for 6 weeks during high school. She was in Toulon, France. Her sophomore year, we met out studying in Valladolid. And I actually, when I was working with the juvenile delinquents in Iowa, it was a job where, in Fort Dodge, it was a job where I was on grounds for 1 week, and then I'd have a week off. And she was a hall director at Northeast Missouri State University, which is now Truman State University. And so I volunteered in their international student office.
I see.
And they got about 30 hours every other week for free for like a year and a half. And that just further solidified my interest in it. And then we moved to Lincoln, Nebraska. She was a hall director there, and we lived on campus because we got married right before we moved. And I work with individuals with developmental disabilities and troubled and disadvantaged youth. I continued that kind of career path. So a total of 7 years. And in my final semester, I was getting a master's in family science, which is, I'd say it's probably more of a MSW, but without the clinical piece. And I volunteered in their study abroad office and wrote my thesis, which was not groundbreaking at all on study abroad. Didn't have to really do with my family science or anything like that. But so that kind of started. And so my wife got the job at U Chicago when we moved here 20 years ago. Summer of 2000, we moved here. And she was assistant director. So we had the room and board. So I had the luxury, I guess, to search for a job, and I was just right place at the right time, and a position open in the Office of International Affairs. And it's one of those where you apply directly to the office. I didn't go through HR. I don't think I would have been hired, to be quite frank, because I just didn't have the experience. And it was one of these things that's not, it was Harvey Stein, who's a NASA lifetime member. And I said, oh, I did an internship at Nebraska. And he said, oh, with Peter Levitov, another one of these longtime NASA gurus. And I think that solidified it. It just kind of worked. And so it worked out really well. And so that's how I got into the field and worked 17 years at the University of Chicago, 3 different offices. And then 3 years, come about 2 weeks, it'll be 3 years that I've been at Columbia College Chicago as assistant provost for global education. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. 20 years in the field now, and 7 working with individuals with developmental disabilities and troubled and disadvantaged youth. So yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Great experiences, but it's great to be in the field, and I love it. So let me see if I could pull up my slides here. I will, as I'm working on this. So like everybody, coronavirus and COVID and everything going on has really, done a number on kind of, mental health, how are you doing stuff. And so I'm not sleeping well, it seems, lately. And so I was going to go a different direction with this presentation, and I had it slides, and I woke up, I couldn't fall asleep, and I woke up at, I don't know, it was like 5 a.m. And I was like, I woke up around 4:30, and it was just circling in my head that there's been some other things that I've been interested in that have really occupied my time. So I thought, I'm going to talk about that. And so, so as you can see here, I just have so many thoughts going on in my head. I always have a lot of different projects that I'm interested in, different ideas that I see what colleagues are doing. Everything's really intriguing. I do a lot of research, side project work. And so, I was going to focus on, there's a lot of things, but 3 main things. It's the state of the field in international education and job loss of our colleagues and friends, right? The longer we're in the field, the more that our colleagues actually become our friends, and we see them more often, right? Or at least we were. Sometimes I'd see some colleagues 3-4 times a year, when my best man lives just in a suburb of Chicago and I haven't seen him for 6 years, right? Aside from a few Facebook connections. So it's been hard, right? Seeing all that. And then, so that's what I was going to talk about. And I thought, I don't want to dispense a lot of bad news. I don't have answers to that. It's challenging. You and I have been emailing pre-COVID on employment in the field, and even more so since this has all been happening, and when we're hearing colleagues losing jobs or offices where we don't know who is there, but they're sizing down or being eliminated. So I don't want to talk about that. The other is, this isn't it's been quite a busy week. Last Thursday through this Thursday, speaking 3 times, and some colleagues, you can just go to the blog. I'm not going to go in depth, but I'm going to be moderating a discussion and tied into 2 blog posts that colleagues did. And it's really thinking about, this is pre-COVID, but I think COVID has really put this forefront, and how communities abroad, how are we working? How are we caring for our colleagues and our partners abroad that we're no longer sending students, and what is that impact, right, on host families, our staff that are abroad, our vendors that we're working with, and really trying to think about community and ethical decisions. And so it's the blog post started out with a U.S. perspective from a provider and a small selective liberal arts school. Again, you can find us out. And then perspectives from abroad. So one from Florence and one from France. Toulouse, France. And then we're going to have this discussion. So I've really been thinking about that a lot lately. And I'm not at that point with my job right now because my office went through some changes May of 2019. And so I'm really at the ground level rebuilding everything. But this is part of that thought process as I'm really kind of entering that. And then the other is really national security and international education. And that's been something that's been of interest of mine since I've entered the field, quite honestly. It's, as I said, started at Office of International Affairs, and I was advising for the Fulbright. And then the NSEP, the National Security Education Program, now they're known as Boren Scholarships and Fellowships for the grad students. And what those really mean, yes, it's an opportunity for students to get funding to go abroad, but these are not just scholarships that's the end result as the students are going there, but there's really a national security component to it. I mean, the Fulbright is a public diplomacy tool. I argue that the State Department really doesn't care, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, what people are studying, whether we're sending students and faculty and scholars abroad, or we're bringing them here to the US on Fulbright grants. It is really that mutual understanding. It is a public diplomacy tool. Same with Boren scholarships. It is, and there's more. I'll talk about it more because I wrote my dissertation on a part of the Boren scholarships. But it is a Department of Defense funded scholarship and fellowship to send students abroad to learn about other countries, cultures, and language component. And then there's this employment component when people come back. It's always been of interest of mine, going back to even September 11th, and working in ISSS at issuing visa eligibility documents. I mean, it's a very basic process. I mean, it's confusing, but it was really interesting post September 11th, where you would have, students that were Swedish citizen, but they immigrated from Iran at age 2 to Sweden. So for all intents and purposes, they're Swedish. They grew up in Sweden. Their formative years until their early 20s, coming to the University of Chicago to study economics for a PhD. And they're denied entry because they were born in Iran, right? And this was the time where you'd have to have this background check, where it was taking months and months and months. Or conversely, a student similar but Canadian immigrated at a young age, I think around age 2. At that time, students from Canada didn't need a visa. They could just enter with their I-20. So that student's allowed to enter, right? And the Swedish student is not, because of this heritage where they were born, and we're checking them for national security concerns. And it was more than that. It was also, academic degrees, like students that were coming to study community regional planning. Why, there was these checks on why would you come and study that? There was these degrees and majors or disciplines that were subject to these additional checks. And so all of that was just very kind of interesting to me, how this was all kind of playing out in the geopolitical pieces behind what we were doing in the job. And then, I started my doctorate in 2004, and I wrote some papers on this, an early one that got a decent grade, but couldn't get it published anywhere, but it was looking at international education as like an agent of democratization, right? And the value in that's kind of like the Fulbright, right? We bring people here. If you're an international student and you're lucky to be here during an election, right? That's really what you see and read, and this kind of peaceful transfer of power, right? Regardless of the parties, they come together in DC. We'll see what happens this November. Things may change, right? But that's how we do things. And so they can understand how we do things here. And so that's always just kind of been intriguing. And then I think the last piece is, I've always been interested when I was really involved with NAFSA, and some of my early scholarship was looking at soft power and smart power. Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, was big on smart power and promoting that. It's the whole public diplomacy and I actually first met Jay, one and only time, Jay Harris, who spoke last time, who's on here at the Citizen Diplomacy Summit in DC in 2010. We met way back then. So it's always been an interest of mine. And then just recently, I think what really popped into my head at 4 a.m. when I couldn't sleep, I got up and made a huge pot of coffee and really redid my entire slides and presentation was there's a lot going on with, and in particular with China. It's China focused, the main part of my presentation, and it's not because it's just kind of the reality of what I'm seeing. I'm not here, I have a lot of thoughts, but this is just more of what I'm seeing rather than my personal views and opinion. So that's kind of going to guide the focus of this presentation. So those of you, I'm going to quickly go through this. I'm not going to read this to everyone, but those of you that know some of my work, I'm interested in the history of international education. And so the Fulbright Act, I talked about this. This is it's our flagship scholarship, public diplomacy tool through the State Department, signed into law August 1st, 1946. It's been around for a long time. If you're interested, I can provide all these slides later on as well. The next one, that little metal satellite, Sputnik, really changed U.S. higher education. And the National Defense Education Act of 1958 is when, so Sputnik briefly was the the Soviet satellite that was launched into orbit. And so they beat us to the space race in many areas, right, until we landed on the moon. And apparently that's the biggest prize. And so we won over the Soviets. But this really had an impact on the United States in higher education. And primarily it was focused on getting, educating folks in science and technology, right? So that we can be competitive against the Soviets. But a key piece to this that ties into the work that we do is that it focused on not only areas of science and mathematics, but on modern foreign languages, because we were just lacking in that area. And then you get to the Mutual Educational and Cultural Exchange Act of '61. It kind of brought all of these various pieces of legislation together that had this kind of international education. And this is referred to as the Fulbright-Hays Act. So it's 61 signed into law by President Kennedy. And so that's really kind of the third piece of this. There's a lot of other smaller pieces that we're still seeing, but these are the three big main ones, I think, that I think are important and that have kind of brought me into this as an area of interest for me. So again, I talked about China, and the reason that I'm going to talk about China and everything going on is that when you look at the numbers, these are internet open doors. I put it up there. I know everyone knows open doors, but just to kind of put it out there, if you look at it, you're looking at nearly 370,000 students in the U.S. in the 2018-19 academic year, or for China, that's a third of the international students are here. So it's a sizable population, which is, I think, part of the reason why you're going to, explains why we're only seeing, or I'm only seeing, this kind of national security concerns in the U.S. with Chinese students and Chinese scholars. Additionally, the current administration is pretty anti-China, so that explains another part of it. I'm not blind that, that there are not a lot of geopolitical things going on. In fact, 30 minutes before I logged on, I was just quickly reading that the U.S. government has issued warnings that don't go to China because you will potentially be detained falsely and things like that, right? That's not, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Could be true coming here, to be quite frank, depending where you find yourself, for U.S. citizens or international folks. But so I just kind of throw this out here just to provide some data, some basic data. I'm not able to. So one thing I didn't mention, how I've always done PowerPoints is I really more do like the snippet, the screen grabs, and paste them into the PowerPoint slides themselves with citations when necessary. So this is my blog. I'm not promoting my blog, but it goes back to my interest where February 14th, 2018. So this was the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence on Worldwide Threats. And Senator Rubio from Florida asked Christopher Wray, who was the director, the FBI director at the time, still is, specifically about students from China in the U.S. and the threat that they pose to our national security. You can read the answers. You can go on the blog and find it. You can just go on YouTube and easily search this. I tried to make it as easy as possible. Just something does intrigue you and you want to see it, you can go on and easily Google it, right? And then if I'm not mistaken, I believe the conversation also focused a little bit on Confucius Institutes. And I don't talk much about that, but that's, you know, roughly it's Chinese soft power, right? And having these institutes across the U.S. and other countries where they're trying to, you know, promote Chinese culture and language learning and so forth, right? And so, but there's been a lot of concerns with Confucius Institutes, more so from, let's say, the right and the Republican Party having those concerns. The University of Chicago a few years ago was one of the first to get rid of their Confucius Institute. I believe it was while I was still there. It's been a little while. So it's just kind of interesting that, you know, this is not a thing that's happening right now, this conversation with Christopher Wray. But to be honest, as you'll see with some of the dates on here, I could do a whole presentation on everything that's come out and happened in the month of September, 14 days, not even counting today. September 1st through the 14th, there's plenty to talk about, unfortunately. So you have this. This happened in January. You know, a faculty member, a professor at Harvard, he used to be chair of the chemistry department, has been arrested. And it was really for not disclosing information. It's less on the espionage, like the government kind of spies that we think about, right? And what's going on. It's more on trade and intellectual property and things like that. And he wasn't just, you know, I don't know the case. I haven't read it in depth, but it's not, he was getting money, but he just wasn't disclosing it, quite honestly, and what he was doing. And so you'll see a lot of offices of research on campuses, predominantly at our larger research institutions, right? Your Ivies, your Big Ten, your Pac-10, these big land grant institutions that have significant research that are getting federal funding for the research are having to really monitor this much closer, having to set guidelines and things like this. And so this professor is dealing with some significant things. Again, this is the Department of Justice notification. So again, January 28th. So not during COVID, not anything. And they kind of tied in not only to his case, but some others. Arrests that they had made. There's a few of these. So this comes from the Department of Justice, the Central District of California. So again, Chinese national charged with destroying hard drive. You know, we're guy's 29 years old at UCLA. You know, he was a Chinese national researcher at UCLA. Next one, University of Virginia, opposite coast. You know, charged person 34, conducting research at UVA, charged with criminal complaint with a pair of federal crimes, charged with accessing a computer without authorization or exceeding authorization. Southern District of Texas, right? Texas A&M professor working with NASA on space projects, hid affiliations with Chinese state-owned academic and commercial institutions. Acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Wolf. When you have all of your secretaries as acting, you don't need to go through confirmation hearings. That's how that works, right? So he was the architect of the detentions, you know, at the border with the migrants that were coming across and seeking asylum and so forth. He was part of that. So I think that, so you're going to see a lot of tweets. Karen Fisher, I think most of us in the field know her work. She's great. If you're not on Twitter, just a plug for Twitter, anything and everything that happens in our field winds up on Twitter. It is the place, I think, to go. I had created a list. It's about 300 people. I call it International Ed News and Views. It's reporters like Karen Fisher or Elizabeth Redding from Inside Higher Ed to thought leaders in the field. A lot of good stuff there. So tweet speaks for itself, right? Obviously, you can click on the article and read much more. State Department now requiring Chinese diplomats receive federal approval to visit college campuses. So in a place like Chicago, where you have consulates and on occasion, institutions of higher ed, I would see that at University of Chicago, where they would invite the diplomatic corps to come to various events. It's a great connection on so many levels for an institution to be able to do that. And the fact that it's in Chicago, it's just a 7-mile drive south, or I suppose up to Northwestern. Even at Columbia College Chicago, the Israeli consulate had a 50-year kind of anniversary birthday and celebration party that we were invited to, and I went to. It was interesting, right? So this really kind of stunts that engagement, right? With bringing in a consulate general or someone else from the diplomatic corps from whatever country, Germany. I mean, in this case, it's China, to come and talk with students. That's a great thing. It's a great opportunity for our faculty to engage. It's a great opportunity for our students to engage, to try to understand these differences. This is being put to a halt, right? I think that it's going to be challenging for these to be approved. And I would say if they are approved, there's definitely someone in the audience listening to hear what they're saying, right? So this is, I'm going to go back. That was, stepping back here, this is September 9th. Karen posted this about Chadwell, the 50 Chinese students having their visas revoked. The diplomat one that I was just talking about, Chinese, September 3rd this year. This is a State Department posting, Secretary Pompeo talking about, I'll talk a little bit about that here. It's just kind of an event that happened. I think a lot of this is, we see this, but we're so overwhelmed with our work in general, and now with COVID, and some of this stuff is just kind of falling through the cracks, for lack of a better term. And so it's just kind of off of our radar. Again, this is September 2nd, where he was talking about the concern that students from China are having, and requesting that institutions, check on their investments and making sure that they're not investing in Chinese companies and things like that. September 2nd, Pompeo doing the circuit on, to meet the base. I think it's Lou Dobbs. I used to like Lou Dobbs when I was in college. Boy, now you listen to him and it's quite a different story sometimes. And he's always been on the business side of things and the networks. And so, here he is talking on Fox Business. I'm not sure what this discussion specifically has to do unless they're talking investments in higher ed, right? And so it's just another avenue for the U.S. to reach an audience to talk about the concerns that Chinese students may pose. And if you look, he does say, this is in quotes here, they aren't all spies, but many of them are being watched. Right, so this is State of the State. Here's one from September 1st, 15 Chinese visiting researchers from China at University of North Texas forced to leave. They cut ties with their government-sponsored scholarship program. This is August 25th. So I actually had heard on the news that we closed the Chinese consulate in Houston. Now I can see why. They're making the case that it was an intelligence gathering operation, but cutting edge scientific research from American universities. September 13th, so it jumps around a little bit here, but this is an article from a New Hampshire, our Business Insider, talking about a Senate candidate who, in New Hampshire, who was making inappropriate, disrespectful comments about Chinese students. step back a little bit from it, but this is what is going on. It's I'm not sure the exact technical term, but once you say it, it's out there. You could say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, but it's out there. I mean, people hear this. Our students are, and it's not just Chinese students. I mean, it is directed at Chinese students and scholars. I mean, I'm not sure I would want to come to the United States right now, to be quite frank, if I was from China, just because of this, the concerns that you may not be able to complete your degree, the blatant racism that's going on, rampant across the country. And then, the impact that, well, I'm not from China, I'm from Japan. Maybe I'm going to have the same types of experiences. Or I'm from Brazil. What is that going to be for me coming in these experiences? Is the U.S. or, going back, I won't go back, there's several slides, but you look at the data, I think I wanted to touch on this earlier. You had Venezuela, Iran, as the top 20 in the top 25 ascending countries to the United States, but this focus, I'm not specifically, I didn't Google search Chinese students and American policy and visas and espionage and intellectual property. These are things that flow through my Twitter account that I'm seeing, and it is all specific to China and the US approach. Again, this is June 28th, so, FBI is urging universities to monitor some students and scholars. So this goes back to, I think it was the 18th of August. So Undersecretary Cratch, if I'm getting that correct, sent letters to many US institutions and their governing boards talking about investments and where are you investing in, and you can read more on that. I'm not going to delve into that, but this is really getting, they are, the US government, this administration is really cracking down on this. Right or wrong, good or bad, that's not my discussion here. That's more than happy to have those discussions with people offline. I'm just presenting it as I see it and what's happening. But it's not just the US. There's just two examples here. This is Australia. Same kinds of things going on there. And with their Prime Minister Morrison, and the concerns that they are now levying against agreements with Chinese institutions on many levels. And then this is from Mint. I did Google Mint to make sure, try to figure out what kind of site it is. It's a business website from business focused in India. So it, could be, I don't know which way they slant, but either way, they are looking at visa restrictions on students from China and the influence that they're having at Indian universities. So it's not specific to the US. This is certainly a global issue, but I just wanted to highlight. So it's just not, so I could find more examples, but I really wanted to focus on the US. So these are two slides that will kind of transition into study abroad and what we're doing. And I'm just checking my time here. Transition to study abroad and what we're doing on that side of the mobility spectrum. Right now, this is us sending our students abroad. And so this comes from around 2014. And I think many people will remember this. And when the FBI was checking in on offices, study abroad offices, they put together, this is I believe it's 2014. It's about a 28-minute kind of mockumentary. I'm not sure what you would call it, to be honest, where it's dramatization of a student from the US who was studying in Shanghai, and he got caught up in the game. And this is an interesting one. Again, these are not, I could not be honest at 5:30, 6:30 this morning, figure out how to embed a video. So I just did a screen grab, but you could go find it online. This is about 4.5, 5 minutes long. This is interviewing him kind of about the experience and how he got caught up in it. So it's, I suppose it's a two-way street. And so now I kind of throw out just a little bit of data on US students going abroad. I guess, again, open doors. It's from 2017-18 academic year. China's number 7 in terms of us sending students. It went down slightly. But you're looking at 11,600 and change U.S. students going abroad to China each year. We all know that opened doors, and I think there are larger challenges for tracking and counting U.S. students going abroad than incoming international students for a variety of reasons. But it's a lot of students. So I just wanted to kind of provide this as comparative. It's, you're looking at 12, let's round it up to 12,000 versus 370,000, a very big difference. But this gets into my, continues my interest in it. It is the National Security Education Act of 1991. This came as, NSEP, the Bourne Scholarships and Fellowships. And I did my dissertation on this, but essentially it was David Bourne, who's a former governor of Oklahoma and then a senator for Oklahoma, very esteemed individual. Then he went to become president of University of Oklahoma until about a year ago. And if you'd like to find out why he's not, you can Google that. But it's a shame. It was disappointing to hear that news in fall and why he's not. But nonetheless, he really realized in 1991 with the fall of the Berlin Wall and us and Desert Storm, Shield and then Desert Storm, that our geopolitical view and framework was changing, right? We still had to worry about Russia, the former Soviet Union, but we now had to focus our attention on the Middle East. And desert fatigues have not gone out of style anytime since, right? We've had a presence in the Middle East since. But essentially, the National Security Education Act and Bourne provides scholarships to go research or study. You have to incorporate language study, and it has to be in a non-Western country. If you're going to go to a Western country, let's say Latin America, you're going to go down to Nicaragua, you have to be fluent, and then you can petition to have that language component. Now, we still need to have people, the purpose is that we need to have people who are knowledgeable on countries all over the world and languages that are not commonly taught here. And so to be able to send a US student to Pakistan and study one of the number of languages there that are deemed crucial to US national security from a national security perspective is crucial to have that. And so it's very interesting. So one of the concerns as a historian, this has always intrigued me, is that what's interesting about Bourne is that it's funded by the Department of Defense. Always has been, always will be. Typically you have like Fulbright and Gilman and other scholarships that are funded by Department of State. You do get Department of Ed, that comes out of the Fulbright-Hays Act, where they, the Fulbright DDRA, the Doctoral Dissertation Research Programs, those are Department of Ed grants. And so they have international funding. And you might even see some with Commerce. You see Commerce, I think, has a stake in it. You will see them at NASA conferences and things like that, but it's not, the presence and engagement with our field and industry is not as high as state and Department of Education, but nonetheless it's there. And so for the Department of Defense to be funding these scholarships, there was significant uproar and concern in the field. And what does this mean? Are we sending spies out? Are we going to have spies all over the place? It was fascinating. In the early days, I was fortunate at UChicago where the D said, throw all this away. And I said, this is valuable stuff. And there are documents, handwritten memos back and forth and facsimiles, colleagues amongst institutions. What are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? How are you going to allow this to happen? And how schools promote it? And the biggest thing is that because there's also a service requirement, and that has changed, and that's what my dissertation was on, is that there's a service requirement after you complete your scholarship, your studies, and complete your graduation. And the purpose is that so that we can retain folks that are knowledgeable on these world regions and these less commonly taught languages to come and work in the federal government. So that was the other big early concern of the program. And, there are challenges with this, no doubt, and the service requirement has changed significantly. Right after September 11th, it changed where they tightened up the requirements, and it was really in the intelligence community for a couple of years. Now it's broadened a little bit more where you could go and work for a variety of organizations. Department of Commerce, I talked about it before. You could go work on some kind of international team or assignment, and that could be petitioned to count for your service requirement. So it's all very fascinating to me, and how all of this is all tied together from sending abroad. And then just a couple things here real quick that I pulled from my dissertation. This isn't new with the Boren. You know, the CIA was funding variety of organizations, the National Student Association, the Asia Foundation, and even IIE in the 50s and 60s. So that involvement was there in our field, IIE, right? I mean, it's not doing it now, or I guess I don't know, to be quite frank, but in 2005, not specific to international education, but Robert Mueller, when he was director of the FBI, put together a National Security Higher Education Advisory Board. It was chaired by Graham Spanier, Penn State, until his fall from grace. And then he worked in national security position that no one really knows about after he left his position at Penn State. But nonetheless, this is showing engagement with U.S. higher education and the FBI. For what? I don't know, right? Is it looking at international students coming in? Is it looking at the training that we can provide U.S. students to become federal employees or work for the FBI? I mean, I don't know. I wasn't privy to any of those kinds of meetings, but it's interesting to me with this kind of intelligence and tying into higher education. And then in November 2007, a Fulbright scholar to Bolivia indicated that he was approached by a regional security officer to keep tabs on and addresses on any activities of Venezuelan or Cuban doctors or field workers, right? So again, this is the public diplomacy tool. They're specifically not supposed to, students are not supposed to engage in any of this kind of federal or government or secretive intelligence type of work while on a Fulbright grant. That's part of the things that they signed, and he was approached by someone at the embassy, right? So, so here's just some examples of you know, it's been pretty much focused on Chinese students and scholars coming in, but I wanted to highlight some issues that have been going on with U.S. students and scholars going abroad as well. And then just the book, I have no stake in this, but it's a great book. It's only published about 3 years ago. Dan Golden, he wrote the book Price of Admission several years ago, and he just probably about 2 years ago, I think he put out a revised edition, and the you know, with the scandal, the admission scandal that came out with all the people of power and some of the actors that are out there that got their kids in college. So he's, you know, saw an opportunity, let's revise the book and publish that. But so this book is great. I'm not going to read it all to you, but it really kind of brings this down, and it ties into other things. I mean, right here, I'm just going to move my slide. You know, I was specific on China because that's what I'm seeing in my feeds right now. But this is, you know, China, Russia, Cuba. So it's not just specific to Iran, nuclear scientists getting them to defect. So there's a lot going on, and it's not just for, you know, concerns about international students and scholars coming to the U.S., but also on us sending folks abroad and what they're involved with that we are aware of. That's kind of it. I'm just looking at my time here. Not too bad. You know, if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer any. Share the slides, or if people have thoughts. It doesn't even have to be a question. It could be a thought or something that I've missed. Again, I completely changed this morning in my focus, because in reality, that's been on my mind a lot. What's going on?
Well, David, thank you very much. That was a pretty expansive view of things. And I really like that last part about Bolivia, because my family's from Bolivia. So I thought that was very interesting. And it's probably going to get worse now. You know how politics are. But what I like, just picking up on something that you had said, David, earlier, you said you viewed internationalization as an agent of democratization.
Yeah.
And I do agree with you. What do you think now? How is that going to transition? Because some people now are calling for international education to be an agent of anti-racism. Is that too much of a leap, or how would they go about doing that?
I don't think it's too much of a leap. I think with the election of President Obama, it really showed that we are not where we maybe thought we were as a country. And it's only been fueled and exacerbated now with President Trump, right? And so it's tough. I think about this a lot. I was talking to my neighbor who lives next door. We have a Black Lives Matter sign in our front window that the kids painted back in May. And it sits in our front window, and it's African American. I was taking the garbage out just a couple weeks ago. I don't see him that much anymore because he's staying somewhere else as well. But he came and said, "Thanks for putting the sign up. That's great." And so we talked about it, we were talking about someone that I know, longtime friend, and we really have to start sometimes at the very basic level of understanding and decency, right? I don't. It's hard to make these big leaps. We have to just be like, we were talking about it. I said, he has no idea what it's like to walk into a store and have people stop what they're doing and watch him. It's like, yeah, but it's bigger than that. I said, I know, but he needs to understand at this basic level first on how this is, at that basic level. So I think international education is a wonderful tool for that. It absolutely is. But I think many people who go abroad already kind of have that within themselves, right? That they're open to differences. There are people that maybe wouldn't go abroad, and for whatever reason they do. Talking about this person, I was like, they go to Jamaica or Dominican Republic, and they go from the plane to the resort and don't leave. And it's like, you weren't in Jamaica. You saw 8 minutes, maybe if your resort was further away, if you're going from Cancun down to Playa del Carmen, maybe you had a 25-minute drive and that's your exposure, but you weren't in Mexico, right? And so it's this basic level thing. But, I think some of these things can be very eye-opening for folks, but it's also tied into, it's not just sending abroad. I think it's working that into the curriculum and the overall kind of focus of the institution. What I really like about Columbia College Chicago is we really are doing a lot in this area, just without even thinking about going abroad. We all put our pronouns in our signature line. We are really trying to training, but it's not this forced training. I mean, it's mandatory, but people aren't. It's wonderful. People aren't like, oh my gosh, I have to go to a 1 hour, let alone a 2-day training on this stuff. It's great. And so, like I said, I'm rebuilding up my program. And so figuring out how to incorporate some of that stuff and focus and information into our study abroad programs is certainly a goal. But I don't think everyone's going to go abroad. I saw a tweet that a colleague sent, and I wish I could find it, and I don't want to spend time searching while I'm on here, but it said, there are so many people that have never left their state ever in their life, and then they say we have the best country in the world. We're the best at this. It's like you have no basis for comparison, right? And especially if you're watching Lou Dobbs, right? And then you get this perspective from him, which is pretty extreme, more than I ever had thought. So, I definitely think that it does. But I think most people that go abroad have already kind of appreciate these differences that from other countries and cultures, on so many levels that, there are going to be those that are not culturally sensitive or racist, that they're just never going to go abroad. And that's unfortunate, right? So we have to figure out other ways. And I think that's the beauty of international students coming here, right? Is to have those opportunities. I have side of the family, I have a cousin who was in the Army. He was deployed to Afghanistan twice, like, middle of the mountains, forward operating bases 2 or 3 times. And his sister, who's a teacher in Wisconsin, they, for University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, had an ESL program, and they had a student from Saudi Arabia that stayed with them. And it was really great. And my cousin, the one who was deployed, was open to others and differences and cultures and things like that. But it really was great. And it was I think was really great is for others on that side of the family to see that this guy from Saudi Arabia is just a guy wanting to learn English and experience his time in Milwaukee and learn about American football and hang out and hang with their kids. They had keys to his, he could come and go into the houses. It was great, right? And so it was really, I think that's where the true engagement happens. Study abroad, it's going to be hard to get people to go abroad, but when you have people from whatever other country coming in and having those opportunities, and when people really have the time to sit and get to know someone, they really can understand that yeah, there are a lot of differences, but just because they're from anywhere else doesn't mean that it's a problem. And Uncle at Christmas said, don't you get, because I'm fortunate enough to travel, last 3 years has been pretty extensive, or 3.5, and don't you get nervous where you're going? I mean, I've been in the Middle East, and I got where he was going. I said, much more so than going to a movie theater or a school. My chances of being shot are so significantly less if I'm outside of the country. Oh, well, yeah, good point, right? So it's a lot of work, right? And sometimes it's at a very, very basic level. But I think with those that are not culturally sensitive, it has, there are opportunities going abroad. Again, it's like, no, you didn't go to the Dominican Republic. You went to the resort, and yeah, you left and you went riding on whatever, buggies or something like that, through a jungle that was all cured and manicured for tourists. And then you went back to your all-inclusive bar, right? So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. I just kind of rambled on that, but it's tough. It's a tough situation that we're in as a country, no doubt. It's concerning.
Your comment about parents and concerns reminds me of a high school program that I coordinated for several years. And I want to mention it here because of your focus on national security. Today, it's most of you probably know about it. It's the National Security Language Initiative for Youth,
Yep.
run by State Department's ECA. I coordinated their Jordan program for about 6 years. So taking high schoolers to Jordan to study Arabic through our university platform. And after about 2 years of dealing with constant safety concerns, such as you mentioned, I wrote a letter to parents that touched on, it got very, very direct, touched on mall shootings, theater shootings. I shared statistics, probabilities, then compared it to the very safe environment in Jordan comparatively.
Right.
And I tell you what, after those 2 years, in year 3 and beyond, upon sharing that letter, those parent concerns and the calls and the messages reduced drastically. So it is a matter of perspective sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that initiative, there's a lot, and actually a lot of this was kind of centralized, and it's been a while, so I'm not going to get the wording correct here, but came out of the Bush administration. Definitely strategic, but I also think, as much as I say politics here, I disagree with the gentleman on so much, but he kind of understood that. I don't think that he was right. He understood this on many levels from a national security, and it was really tied. It kind of came through. And so it was interesting. I remember seeing some site where it was the Obama administration, and they were talking about this initiative, and someone said, oh, another Obama initiative. And I couldn't help myself. I had to say this was actually a Bush and Condoleezza Rice. It came out of the other administration. So it's okay to not like it. I disagree with you. but you should be informed in your dislike of it and that it wasn't an Obama thing. He's just continued it. So you could be mad at him for continuing it, but he certainly didn't start it. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's to get these kudos to any of these high schoolers that go and take advantage of these opportunities to go to the Middle East on this funded scholarship, to be 14, 15, 16 years old. I went to Germany on a high school exchange group, like 18 of my peers, and this is not the same thing. It's very, very different, and they're learning languages that are not commonly taught here. And yeah, it's fantastic. It's for the students to have those experiences.
It's a good outreach opportunity for universities simply to make high schools aware of that program, right? And maybe help teachers and students, help the teachers, help the students to develop compelling proposals, get kids from your area on that program. I think they love it, and it could be a good part of outreach.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. For sure. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I had a question.
Yes.
Hi, David. I'm Katie.
Hey, Katie.
I was just wondering, you had mentioned, rebuilding your program and such now, and with the context of the topic that you covered and this interaction between national security and international education, are you focusing on different destinations, whether for incoming or outgoing students, moving forward? Obviously, nobody's traveling right now, so it's kind of a difficult time, but a big brainstorming time. And, I agree with you that generally students or people who go abroad do tend to be a bit more open to experiencing different cultures and things like that naturally, but we all also know about the prevalence of those students who want to go to Barcelona because their friend, sibling, fraternity brother, whoever went there. And I kind of see an opportunity there. Maybe they are a little bit more open, but have you done any thinking about that, or are you looking at that at Columbia College?
Yeah, great question. Yes, we are. So there are a lot of changes. It's been a long 15, 16 months to be honest. And much of what I'm doing is really rebuilding from, start to finish, from inquiry to return and everything in between, and getting how are we going to do transcripts? I mean, everything is being rebuilt. But we are heavily concentrated in Europe, many in the UK. Some of those, just by me visiting or experiences I've had, those are ending. They're not going to, and I had to tell a faculty member that's very engaged to be like, here's why. I can't. It's politely saying it's a mess. I can't have a student running their office and no one replying to my messages. And, they want to hire someone that's professional. So I'm dealing with a lot of that kind of stuff. But I do want to diversify just for our students. I'd like to get our faculty members. We do faculty LEDs. That whole process needs kind of streamlining. It's not bad, but it could improve. But again, we're really focused on Europe predominantly. We've had one to Peru like 3 years ago. It's kind of it. And so I'd really like to encourage and trying to engage faculty. I think that's really the key, to get them to figure. And I think that ties in then to their teaching and their focus on what they're going to teach. It's that, curriculum integration, but I'm not at that point by any means to move forward with that. But it's really trying to get the campus to think about where else can our students go. We had an exchange with, school in Korea that I didn't set up, but I inherited, and then they didn't accept any of our students. And it's like, okay, this isn't working out. We have to figure something else out. The problem is that I'm not going to travel for a while, and it's really important to go to these other countries to see and visit the campus and the whole thing that goes with setting up a new program. And so trying to encourage our students to even work with providers and to kind of diversify their interests. That's the biggest, I think, area that I have some leverage over, to be like, England's great, but what about Indonesia? Here's this program. Or what about Kenya? Or what about Brazil or Bolivia or wherever? So I'm still I'm not fully at that point, other than knowing I want to diversify, but we have a long way to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any others, or?
I'm sure there might be some
Oh,
others.
I'll pop in here with one. Hi, David. Nice to see you. Nice to see
Hi.
everybody. Have you moved at all at Columbia to virtual programming for the near future?
Yeah, great question. No, only because, and study abroad is at a halt at Columbia College. It was determined in May that we won't be sending students abroad on J-term 2021. So I had to flesh that out. Here's what that means. That's a spring enrollment. That means I can't not send someone on a J-term to Bath Spa University and then a week before send someone to London on exchange. So that really we're not sending anyone abroad unless they're on a faculty-led on our programs till summer 2021. So we have this time. So again, we're rebuilding it. I haven't had much time to do anything to formalize that by any means. I think there's value. I need to attending plenty of webinars on it. I think that virtual, and I've always felt this, can be informative, but it doesn't necessarily have to be for credit. So I think that that's kind of the first step. And I think that can help determine our partners, right? Engage our faculty in fashion or cinema and television or music or dance, right? How can we, dance is a little bit hard, even remote now, it has to be in person, but or theater, how can we connect with other institutions or students or faculty that we can have a meaningful exchange? People find it worth their time. But they're not getting credit. That's, I think, the first step for me is to set those up. I was talking with my daughter. She's a freshman at Temple. They're all online now. She's decided to stay, and we're supporting that, and it's great. But this summer, I was talking to her about this because she had done some exchanges in Peru this last year on a kind of theater exchanges, and so she was doing this summer, beginning of summer, kind of connecting with some of her peers there in this program that she did. It was a theater program, and connecting with the new students. She kind of created it herself. And that was great. But I talked to her. I said, hey, she's a great case study. Good student. I said, what do you think about this? Would you, money aside, it was something in Spain, virtual for credit. She's like, no. What's the difference between that and taking a class at Temple or wherever online, whether I'm sitting in my dorm room in Temple or sitting at home in Chicago? Could I have a British professor teaching me at Temple the same content that I could have the same British professor that goes back off of their leave or sabbatical in the US and teaches the same class? As you can see, I'm kind of all over. I haven't fully signed on to that. It's been going on for well over a decade with COIL initiatives and all of that. I think it's great. It's just at this point, I think if we did not have the changes at Columbia College that we had with the massive reorganization, I mean, everything has fallen to me. I don't have an admin assistant. I have no one. I was hiring a director, and it's like, well, we'll get you a really good admin assistant. Last fall, and well, now I'm not getting anyone. So it is all on me to pay the bills, to answer the phones, to order the supplies, to do everything. So the bandwidth that I have to focus on virtual and any kind of meaningful thing has been a challenge. I've not had any students that have approached me about that. A lot of the providers, and it makes sense that they're making these offerings available, whether it's a virtual internship or taking classes remotely, but I've not had that interest yet. Again, I don't have the bandwidth to promote it yet. So that's kind of it in a nutshell with the virtual stuff. We'll be late to that game as I kind of see how others are doing it. And I'll let those bumps and kinks get kind of ironed out before we jump into that. I got to get new programs, and I got to figure out credit transfer processes and the application and everything. What are we asking for? So I'm at that basic level. This national security stuff is all kind of my side project stuff. Once that clock hits 5 o'clock, so to speak, that time, and my kids are at soccer, I'm sitting in cars, I have to read something. I have to do something. That's where I'm doing all the side projects. I'm reviewing NASA research symposium proposals tonight. They're due Friday. I volunteer for that. That's the kind of stuff that I do. And this national, it's just a part of it. And so it's nothing that I've picked up. It's just when I was sitting there this morning, I was like, this has really been, I was thinking about stuff, and that's like, well, that's what I'm kind of going to focus on today at this talk, because it's the most meaningful. I was going to focus on the career stuff, but it's just, I don't know what to say about that. Nothing substantive in terms of advice. I'm seeing what everyone else is seeing and doing the same thing. So it's a changing field. And I don't think many schools are thinking in these national security things. And I don't think we need to, other than working with the international students and those challenges that they're going through. For the US students, I'm not focused on. I'm not showing the FBI video, either of them. They're not on the website to be like, hey, pay attention. I don't know, maybe I should. The one that's like 5 minutes, he's like, oh, when they offer you $10,000 and you're young, you're going to take it, right? It's like, okay, I get it. But I'm more worried about the impact that it's having on current and future international students and predominantly with Chinese students, because of so many issues that they're going through right now. And it's all scary. I'm sorry, I have a saxophone that's going to start with my 6th graders music class here, apparently. That's all right. It's all right. Anyways, yeah. Other questions or anything, or?
If there are no other questions, I'll just tell, everyone, just David has your email addresses from the registration, so he will send the slides to you.
Perfect, yep.
And I will have this video ready by tomorrow.
Great.
So that's it. I just wanted to say thank you very much, David, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
You're very passionate about the national security and international education. It piqued my
Yeah,
interest in that.
It's all, yeah, for me, it's interest rather than necessarily promoting or diving into it. It's fascinating to me, this kind of geopolitical stuff, but in our field and what's happening and how we have to work through it. So thanks for the invitation and for everyone's time. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
No, we'll do it again. And so thank you, David. And for those of you who are still here, our next speaker will be Juan Miguel Parra. He's a Cuban poet and a Cuban professor in philosophy. I met him in Havana. He's excellent. I'm reading his poetry right now. He's got a gift. So he will be speaking to us on September 30th at 2 p.m. And I'm very happy to have Kevin Locke join us. He's a Lakota Indian. He's also a board of advisor member for Broadia. And he will be bringing a Native American Indian voice to some of our discussions. So I encourage you to join us then. That's October 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And we do have some International Education Week speakers that we will be announcing very shortly. So I hope you can join us then. So thank you very much for all of your time. Jess, thank you for handling the chat. And thank you very much, David, to you for your time and for your knowledge and for sharing that with us.
Yep, thanks. Appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
All right, thank you.
To sex and practice.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.
Yep, thank you. Bye.